Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at uenradio.com.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Distill It, a 360-degree view of life in sports. I'm Wendy Rosenthal here with
Eira Schwitzer.
Yeah,
who's
I'm not
trying
even trying.
Who's trying not to be distracted by the bedazzled Longhorns logo here.
You like the
No,
bling?
I don't like it. No,
Okay.
I do not like it.
So, just quickly, because we have our amazing guest today, and she is from the University of Texas, I felt very compelled to put on my UT bling and my colors. Our guest is not going to be able to see me, so she'll just have to trust that I'm in burnt orange, even though I bleed cardinal and gold.
You do.
Okay, so
I can
are
vouch
you
for
over
that.
it?
I can vouch for that.
You're over
Yes,
it.
Yes.
We're okay. We can move on.
Yes, we can move on. We're still friends.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, we're very happy to be here today, as we always are, to talk about our favorite topic, which is sports and everything to do with sports, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, anything that has to that has to do with sports, because sports is really a metaphor for life, as we say all the time. Oh. What you see on the field is often what's going on in people's lives, and when we examine it, we feel like we're not only talking about sports, but we're talking about us.
Yep.
And we are excited, dedicated sports fans. We also are the partners in a company called the Distillery Inc. that works with athletes at every level to help them in their transition away from sports, because that's oftentimes a difficult one. We're here at the wonderful, beautiful UBN radio studios in downtown Hollywood, and we love being here. It's our, as we always say, our third or fourth home. And we want to say a quick hello to Jarvis, our security blanket engineer extraordinaire. How are you today, Jarvis?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. We're hoping that our topic today inspires your participation, because we always love hearing from you.
Okay.
Before we jump in, I just want to remind everybody that we are on Facebook Live. We do take a look and see who is watching. We say hello, and we love to hear your comments. We also encourage you to call in with any questions for us or our guests. The number is 323-284-7826. Normally we have a little bit of banter about other things that are going on, but we're so very excited and appreciative that we are able to bring this next guest on, that we wanted to just jump in and have time to talk about our topic today, which is women in sports. We feel like this is going to be a topic that we're going to be going over probably many times in many different ways.
Sure.
But with the recent, let's say, faux pas that Cam Newton came out with not too long ago, maybe about a week and a half, where he was shocked and surprised that a woman reporter actually could talk about the game in a deeper, more meaningful way.
Yep.
To the U.S. Soccer team, who ended a recent battle to have pay equality, given that they are a much better, more successful team than our U.S. men's team, who, oh, by the way, I hate to say this, is not going to the World Cup, which is, very shocking and sad. So we felt we wanted to address this issue, and we were fortunate enough to ask a very accomplished sports personality in the world of sports, who happens to be a woman, who is, I'm sorry, I'm just almost speechless because I'm so excited she's here. Chris Plonsky is the University of Texas Women's Athletic Director, Assistant AD. She has an incredibly impressive resume of not only being at the university for what is now her 29th year, has a few national championships under her belt as the athletic director, including volleyball, track and field, several, 58 conference championships, and serves on several organizations where her voice is clearly impacting the world of sports. And we are lucky enough to have her join us. We're going to bring her on right now. Hi, Chris.
How are you all?
I like the thought of that burnt orange in Hollywood.
Let me tell you something. Wait till you see it, because it is sparkly and glittery.
It really
so
is.
I'm going to bring it next time we're in Austin. I'm going to bring it so you can see it.
Burnt orange and bling, even better, even better.
Yeah. So my husband, who often gets talked about on the show, Chris, who you also know, is going to be disappointed I didn't wear his hats, which he offered up as sacrifice to me. But I had to go with the bling.
I'm happy about it. It's really great to talk to you both and follow your show, and it's a privilege to be here. I'm a little bit in a noisy place. I'm in DFW Airport. We just finished, ironically, a Big 12 AD meeting up here where we had some neat conversations about what's going on in the world of sports today, particularly collegiate athletics. But it's a fun time right now in the fall with a lot of things converging.
Sure.
Major League Baseball playoffs, college football is approaching its zenith. A lot of the fall sports for men and women, and obviously basketball. If you're a junkie like me, it's around the corner, so it's a fun time.
I just have to ask this because, we do follow all of the sports around college. In college, we're big fans, and we've been watching UT, obviously, the football team right now, and you got to be happy. They're turning it around. I mean, it was a tough game on Saturday, but just to divert for a minute, you got to be happy, right?
It was a tough end, kind of like the USC game.
Yeah.
We're right there.
Yeah.
Coach Herman has our kids, I think, playing hard. And football can be a game of momentum. And, we had grab momentum in both of those games. And in games probably where we weren't really expected to compete and get down to the wire with a chance to win, but we were there. And with a freshman quarterback, really a freshman and a sophomore, those are the 1-2 guys, and very, very young players on both sides of the ball. I think we're happy in terms of our progress, but again, coaches, they only keep score one way. They like to see the left hand of that equation behind than the right.
Yeah.
So we've got a big game at home on Saturday against Oklahoma State. It'll be early. It'll be 9 a.m. Pacific time, so y'all need to get up and have breakfast
we're
with
up.
the Longhorns.
We are up.
State.
And we will be watching. In our household, that is, again, despite the different the colleges that me and Mike went to, I'm deeply rooted in the University of Texas for family reasons. So there's not a Saturday that we can't, that we don't watch
Exactly.
a UT game. So, look, we wanted to start. You are in a unique position. When we started thinking about what we wanted to talk about on the show, we realized there's two aspects to women in sports.
Yeah.
There's the professional career path, and then there's I'm an athlete from an athlete's perspective. And both are equally important, and both have suffered in the world from a disparity between men and women. And you're in a particular position to see all sides of it. Your career has been in the profession of sports. You are working with people across the board in many different ways on how sports are shaped.
Yeah.
And you get to engage with the athletes themselves. So we really are looking to hear both sides of that, if you can talk to us about how and why today, in this day and age, we still have such disparity. I was doing a little bit of research preparing for this show, and I was shocked to see some of the statistics. Things like, the sports industry is probably the lowest glass ceiling of all industries out there right now. Funding for women's athletic programs in universities is still well below men's. Why do you think we're still battling this? And are we seeing? We're seeing a lot of change, but where are we in the spectrum of even 20 years ago?
It's a very fair assessment and very fair question. And we have made progress, but for anybody that is passionate about it, the progress is probably not quick enough. I mean, I'll be 60 in January, so I was a Title IX benefactor, if you will. I was in high school when the law passed that summer in '72, and they did begin to organize formalized sports for us in Ohio. I was in Northeast Ohio at the time, originally from Pennsylvania, but I was exposed to sports through my dad. He was a college football player in his day, got an education because of it, and my dad made it perfectly amenable for me to get baseball gloves when I asked for them at 5 years old, because I love the Pittsburgh Pirates. We lived about 30 minutes from Pittsburgh.
I'm a Steelers fan, by the way.
He never discouraged me from trying to participate, being outside, playing with the guys in the neighborhood. And so it really begins there. I think for everybody, it's on a spectrum. But I was encouraged early, and besides at home, when I started to go through school, high school and college, there were more and more advocates there, not to block, but to grease the path. And I just think, depending upon the pockets of the country where you are, and at what level you're viewing this, it can be very different. I will tell you that when I left Kent State, where I majored in journalism, and went to Iowa, they were still playing 6-player basketball, 3 on each side of the court, in 1979. That stunned me. I had been bouncing a basketball playing full court with the guys since, 6th grade.
Right.
But they sold out the Des Moines Civic Center. People were so passionate about young women participating in sport, be it volleyball, basketball, softball, in that state. It's just sort of, again, depending upon what part of the country you're in and how they gravitate towards sport. But the participation was certainly encouraged. And some of those young girls I watched play basketball and softball in Iowa in those early years of my college career as a professional in college athletics are now some of the greatest coaches in those sports. So they've been able to make a career out of it, as I haven't. And I never coached. I was always a publicist or an administrator. I think many children are alive today because I didn't coach, because I think it takes an exemplary sort of, it takes a real aptitude, patience to deal with other people's children in that way. And I learn most from coaches. I admire what they do, just like I admire what the athletes do. Coaches are true teachers, and the students that they impart their wisdom and advisement and toughness to often say later, besides their guardian or their parent, coaches are really the most transformational influences in their lives.
Sure. Well, first of all, before I go on, I just want to thank everybody who's joined us in the last couple of minutes. Jamie Monroy, a good friend, Leigh Gillis, who's in Paris. We've got some overseas viewers, which is always nice to see. You brought up two things that kind of lead into my next question. One is Title IX, and the other is coaching. So one of the interesting facts that I was reading about is for sure, Title IX has changed the face of women's involvement, girls' involvement in sports at every level. One of the knock-on effects from that, and I don't know if you can speak to this, is that the number of female coaches has decreased as a result, or this is what I was reading.
That's true. The game changer that provided the access and the opportunity indeed was the law. None of my colleagues or those who preceded me would deny it. Title IX was a federal law. It had nothing to do with sports, ironically. It had actually to do more with federally funded institutions, but because sports at the college level fell in that domain, you had to begin to take equitable steps for allowing participation and equitable opportunity. So from facilities to the number of programs sponsored to uniforms to training areas, that certainly has contributed to this explosion in the 70s, 80s, and 90s of participation. I went and saw Battle of the Sexes the other night, and you watched that movie, which was so well done. Emma Stone was unbelievable, as was Steve Carell. But put yourself back in the 1969 to 1972-73 era.
Sure.
And when Billie Jean and her sorts held up the dollars, when they formed their own professional league, I think there were 8 of them. 8. Well, I'm thinking in my mind's eye, my first high school basketball team, we had 6 of us.
Sure. Wow.
And then we went on and played softball and did everything else. But think about today, now people are trying out. You got JV, varsity, et cetera. So the numbers are there. But I think what your question about coaching, there's a great coach at the University of Texas who won our only women's basketball championship, and she always told her players, don't coach unless you absolutely can't live without it, because that's how hard it is.
Yeah.
The dedication, the hours, the recruiting now part of it, it's not for the faint of heart. And I'm not saying that women can't do it or excel, but I do think that it's taken its toll on those who maybe want a little more balance in their life. And trust me, the men feel the same way. It's an exhausting profession.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I hate to see the numbers dwindle, because I actually think the greatest coaches we could have, especially to coach women's sports, are actually the females of the last 12 to 15 years, because I think they have received sort of the mother load of opportunity, training, education. They've been coached by the best. They've been trained by the best. They've had the best scholarships. They've probably been on national teams and Olympic teams. But again, they've really got to want to do it, because it is not a layup, as we say.
So this article was making it seem as if it wasn't because of anything like that. It was kind of like, as the popularity of women's sports was increasing and the money around it was increasing, that maybe, the men were jumping in, or that owners or whatever, universities were wanting to have, there was a perception that men would do better. So I think your perspective is really interesting, that it's likely, in all likelihood, it's because it's a grueling career choice.
Right, exactly. Like we see with any industry where, you want to be able to commit your time, but certainly, like Chris pointed out, if you want a balanced life and you're trying to raise a family, it might not be as practical to take on a job that's going to take you away and travel and have to...
Listen, I remember, Chris, at that event we saw you at in L.A., Tom Harmon talking about how I think his family was still living in Houston, or still might be living in Houston, and he's down in Austin, and it's like you're missing out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it like I said, that is a great example of that. And this is a guy that's coached all over our state and at Ohio State and Iowa State and others. He's really paid his dues on his path to get to Texas. But he'll tell you, I mean, he's 42 years old now.
Yeah.
He's all in. I mean, the focus he has, but there are definite sacrifices that not only a coach of his age and ilk, but their families have to go through. I mean, if you really want to have an eye-opener, just look at any assistant coach's resume or bio and see the number of jumps, the number of moves that they've made.
Right.
Because remember, assistants don't always have the call. If their chief, a man or woman, gets fired or decides to move on, they've got choices. They've either they can follow them or they find their own path. And I mean, we've got several coaches on my staff now on the women's side. We have 11 women's sports at Texas. It's a mix of men and women, but our basketball coach is a female. Our soccer coach, who actually was a teammate of Mia Hamm's at North Carolina, Ange Kelly, doing a great job this year. We're in the top 10. Ange is doing a great job. Our swimming coach, Carol Capitani, is wonderful. She was part of many national championships at Georgia. And several of them are moms, and they're raising families.
Right.
And it's actually brought a really neat dynamic to our young women, who can look at them as role models and say, hey, you're running a business, you're busy, you're coaching me, you're teaching me, and you're also balancing having, a partner, a spouse, a husband, and kids.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see, because it really does lend a great lesson to our young women that you can go and do anything you want.
Sure.
Yeah, they're walking the walk, which is great. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's part of coaching, is to kind of walk the walk, isn't it? I want to move on now a little bit, because, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm finding some stats that are maybe 12 months old, which is often the case publicly. But I found a statistic about the fact that, and this is according to the Women's Sports Foundation, male athletes get $179 million more in athletic scholarships each year than females do. Additionally, collegiate institutions spend just 24% of their athletic operating budgets on female sports. I mean, obviously, it's an average, and as well as 16% of their recruiting budgets and 33% of their scholarship budgets on female athletes. When I read that, it was somewhat disappointing. But then on the other hand, I have to say, I kind of went, okay, the business of sports, even at the collegiate level,
Sure.
is a big business. Do you see, I mean, you must feel the effects of that, given that you are the athletic director of the women's program at UT. Do you see, is it that big of a gap all around? Is it something that needs to be changing? Is it really hurting the entrance of female athletes into the university systems?
Well, again, we're fortunate at Texas that we were sort of a trailblazer, along with schools like USC and UCLA. I mean, you're in a market right there where, I mean, the women's ADs that I knew and respected as I was coming through the system included Donna Lopiano at Texas, Judy Holland at UCLA, and Barbara Hedges at USC. I mean, that triumvirate right there, in addition to Christine H.B. Grant at Iowa, you know, you put those four folks on a panel or on a bulldozer, and they're going to get something done.
Right.
And so those programs were leaders. And so if you sponsored a sport, you were very likely fully funded at your institution. And when you had leaders like that, and again, along the way, they probably had to fight for, you know, times and good facilities, building of good facilities and funding. But, you know, at our place, I got to Texas in 1981. And Donna was already selling season tickets, had a full-time fundraiser, a full-time marketer, and she told all of us, we have to learn to pull our own weight. So we were out and about marketing our program, encouraging donors, filling the stands. I mean, frankly, in basketball, we were UConn before UConn.
Right.
We were averaging 8,000 by 1987, and the Irwin Center, I mean, you could walk in there at any given point and see Ann Richards, Barbara Jordan, James Mitchell, Bobby Heenan.
It was a celebrity. It was a celebrity ticket.
Right?
Yeah.
If anybody really wanted to take over the security level of Austin, Texas back in that day, they just had to lock the back door of the Irwin Center and they would have had it made. But again, those were heady days, and the challenge today is to have that same fever pitch that those leaders worked at. And I'm at a place where, again, that's what my coaches and my student athletes, along those that Mike Perrin, our men's AD stewards, the head coaches and the young men, they expect that of leaders. You know, what can you do for to provide these young people and the coaches who coach them the very best possible avenue to success? And at the same time, you want them to go across campus and have a great collegial student experience and prepare what is, you know, really going to help them throughout life, which is a college degree, to change the arc of their success pattern once they're done competing.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because, as you know, that's an area where Eira and I work in. And I was wondering, as a female athlete, you know, the options to go into professional sports are far more limited than there are for male athletes. And even the male athletes are severely limited into whether or not they're going to be able to carry on, you know, into a professional scenario. There is the Olympics. How do you have to, or do women athletes have to think about things differently than men athletes when they get into the university? And is the university, do they think about it? Do they address it? Is it more important than, you know, having to have a more multitasking experience in the university than maybe the guys do?
No, you know, I really think that's one area of our business that I have seen total equitable balance. And, you know, I think, take the young men. I mean, there was an era in men's sports and at the college level where this everybody thought they could be an NBA player, everybody thought they could be an NFL player. I'm seeing more of a reality check there. Again, there's a lucky 1.5% to 2% on average, men and women, that will get to go beyond their collegiate eligibility to earn some money with their athleticism. You know, in recent days for us, it's been the Kevin Durant, the Sonia Richard-Rosses, you know, the individuals like that. But for the most part, I think what young people are seeing now is that the collegiate experience is demanding, it's rewarding. And if you're an international caliber athlete, meaning you can make a national team or an Olympic team, you're certainly going to try that because, you know, you want to represent your country and try to be the ultimate, which is the best in the world, or at least best in your country. But more often than not, I mean, our young people are finishing and graduating on time. And if you do get lucky enough as a baseball player or basketball player to go pro, this is real more common in baseball. Baseball guys, if they do come to college, they stay 3 years, and you're so close to graduation at that point that even when you go and play pro, you can come back and in a couple of semesters usually finish up.
Right.
So our graduation rates are excellent. Again, we had lots of Olympians in Rio, swimmers, divers, track and field athletes. We had a volleyball player, women's volleyball player on the silver medal team there. But all of those young people at some point either have their degree or are going to get one. And I was at the USOC last week with a group of collegiate ADs, and there was an amazing stat out of our Olympic programs in Rio that 82% of the medalists for the U.S. team, men and women, had a nexus with college athletics and college education.
Right.
That's a pretty incredible number. So if you're Scott Blackman and Alan Ashley and the other folks at the United States Olympic Committee, you are looking at the college landscape at places like the schools I mentioned, but Florida State, Stanford, Florida, Texas, USC, UCLA, Arizona State, all of them, they're really the cauldron of where a lot of our Olympic sport participants are being trained and taken care of, and being able to walk into a setting where they can make an Olympic team off of their college experience. So for some, that is the, quote, pro equivalent.
Right, exactly.
That's
the only choice.
But again, some are lucky enough to go on and continue in the WNBA or pro golf or pro tennis.
So
and NBA and NFL and MLB.
So there's a couple of things I want to make sure we talk about. I just wanted to know if you had heard this fact. I thought it was fascinating that Fortune magazine did a study of like the most successful CEOs, EVPs, career women, and discovered that 65% of them have one thing in common, and that is they played sports, and many of them through their collegiate career.
Right.
Which I thought was a really interesting tidbit because, that whole experience of playing sports elevates you and gives. And what the article was talking about is the fact that because you play sports, it allows you to take what you've learned in sports, the competitiveness, all the things that Eira and I are talking about with the distillery, into a level that is highly sought after.
Yeah.
Right, in the professional world.
There's no question. You hit the word on the head. It is the competitive experience.
Yeah.
Everybody can be fit and active and play a sport. You can play an individual sport, like you can swim, or you can play golf, or you can be on a team. But there is nothing like learning what it really means to compete that allows you to transfer that mentality into any other aspect of your being, professionally, even keeping yourself healthy and making good decisions. I think about women who have learned how to, protect themselves in times of trauma or in times of physical assault. If they have had something in their training that has allowed them to think, react, be nimble, be brave, have courage, and call for help too, because that's part of a team. If you learn how to communicate when you're up, when you're down, depend on the man or woman to your left or right, as coaches tell these kids. It's really remarkable to me. Especially for the women that you just mentioned, the CEOs and the EVPs.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that in every critical moment that they've made an advancement or made a great judgment, they probably harken back to the days where they were doing a wall sit and wanted to quit, or couldn't get that last lap in, or they were down in a game and they had to pull together with their team and figure out how to gather the moxie to do it. And it's paid off for me, and I was not a great athlete, but I was on some really wonderful teams, close teams, and I think about those times and times where I need it, and I learned how to compete again. Even if it's mental, learning how to be competitive is the ultimate.
I do have to say, though, that I would imagine that study also has to address the fact that odds are that those female athletes were afforded the opportunity to play sports because they come from families who are at least able, on some level, to afford being able to have them, to give them access.
Yeah.
So it's also, those female athletes were able to play sports, but they were already equipped to sort of maybe follow the executive path because of the families that they were raised in, the areas that they were raised in. So it's important also, I think, to just address the need to make sure that girls of all ages, from all backgrounds and all cultures and all ethnicities, do have access to sports,
without a doubt,
on any level.
And it wasn't 100%, obviously, but
Exactly.
yeah, they did address that. There were, not that it was another factor, but
Sure.
that they were funneled into sports in a way
Exactly.
that was easier because parents could maybe afford the tennis rackets, the tennis
Exactly.
lessons and things,
Exactly.
whatever. I'm just using tennis as an example. But
Absolutely.
I just thought it was an interesting bridge to another part of the show that we wanted to talk about, and that's, women in careers in sports.
Yeah.
Again, some shocking statistics that come up. Although if you put it in the landscape of executives across all industries, okay, women are still behind, which is fine on a certain level. But I discovered that 400 of the combined 467 NC2A Division I athletic departments and Big Four professional sports clubs, less than 40 have a female at the head of their organization, and that's 8.5%. And I think that translates also to professional sports.
Yeah, sure.
And Chris,
And that's dismal. And that's dismal. I mean, let's just say
Yeah.
what it is. It's dismal and disappointing, and it can be better.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a lot in our AD and other governing rooms about how do you change that. Well, the way you change it is the people in power who have empowerment to diversify their workforce
Yeah.
have to take the steps to do it. It's not going to happen any other way. I have a theory, like if you go back to the reason the Rooney Rule was instituted in the NFL, okay, that was a noble goal, right, to
Yeah.
diversify the pool.
right.
But what they discovered is you can't just say diversify the pool. You have to have qualified candidates.
Exactly.
And what was missed originally is that they forgot to check if there were minorities, in this case minority men,
Yeah.
who had been elevated to position coaches and coordinators. In other words, it's probably reasonable to think that if you are an offensive or defensive coordinator in the NFL, you're on the head coaching path. But
Sure.
if they looked across after they passed the Rooney Rule and said, wait a minute, we don't see any coordinators of color, then they needed to go one step down to start the process. And
Right.
so I firmly believe today that in the athletic directorship area across the country of all of our NCAA member institutions, if you do not see men and women of color in executive senior associate or deputy AD positions, or people that are being groomed by the people in power to take that next step and to receive the experience and the chops to do it, then the pool will never become more diverse.
Sure.
And again, we have been very lucky at Texas that now we have Mike Perrin, a wonderful man, Steve Patterson before him, and DeLa Stars before that. These are men who all believe in giving women and men, including ethnically diverse people, that opportunity. And I mean, we have a fundraiser who runs our Longhorn Foundation, and you met Amy Folan, but before that, Amy was a compliance director and she oversaw some sports. But DeLa said, Folan, you want to be an AD? You got to have some revenue generation experience. I'm putting you over
Right.
the foundation.
Yeah.
And he kind of gave her that, as we used to say in the East Coast, a gentle subway push in the back,
Yeah.
and said, get out there, step out, big girl, you can do this.
Sure.
Do it.
And she absolutely can do it. We just had our top fundraising year ever in 2016-17. Credit to Amy and her staff for doing that.
Isn't it true, Chris, also that the University of Texas is one of the very few universities around the country that actually have a women's athletic director? They split the job.
Yeah, it's I'm honored to hold this post, and again, like Amy, I originally came back to Texas in '93 for a revenue generation position. DeLoss wanted me to figure out how to be a marketing, sponsorship, trademark licensing, TV revenue point person. And we had good partners that helped us do that. And I never thought about being an AD, but we had women's ADs, as you know, at Texas. And when Jody Conrad, who had been doing 2 jobs for about 9 years, coaching women's basketball, and after Donna Lopiano left to run the Women's Sports Foundation in New York, they gave Jody the AD title, and she did both jobs for 9 years. To me, impossible, but she did it.
Wow.
And when she decided to step down and just coach, she went to the president of the university and said, look, I'm not going to be doing this coaching much longer, but I want to go back to the gym. I want to see my kids again. I am done with this AD stuff. And DeLoss came to me and said, this is your opportunity. And again, just like the subway push in the back for Amy, you know, I didn't think about that being a role that I could really play, but he said, no, you can do it, and you should do it. And I kept the other revenue parts of my job, and I can do this one as well, and I'm honored to do it. But I think it's Texas's way of validating how important women's athletics has been to its history. We have been an asset to our university. We've won championships. We've graduated thousands of young women. They behave, they represent our university well, and we've moved them on into areas professionally and socially where they can be a productive citizen and make a difference. And we're really proud of that. So
That's
again,
powerful.
I'm honored to be in the chair. It's not about me, it's really about, I think, the weight that our university has and the attention it wants to steward and take care of our women as well as we take care of our men in the collegiate athletics area.
For those of you who have joined us over the last few minutes, I just want to remind everybody we're speaking with Chris Plonsky, who is the University of Texas Women's Athletic Director, amongst many other jobs that she holds, as you can hear. I wanted to talk about the media, because one of the most interesting things that I discovered in researching this is that the media seems to be the holder of why women's sports are kind of still not as elevated as they possibly could be. You know, again, another interesting tidbit: in America, 40% of sports people are women. However, only 6 to 8% of the total sports media coverage is devoted to them, and women-only sports stories add up just to 3.5% of all sports stories in the 4 major U.S. newspapers. Yeah. Chris, I wonder if you can comment on that, because from a lot of what we read, it really feels like, and I understand business and I understand revenues. I mean, Eira and I, we got that part. But it really does feel like if the media would budge a little bit, so much more would open up. What do you think?
Well, you're spot on, but here's the interesting phenomenon. So, I majored in journalism. I wanted to be a sports writer. Okay. Very uncommon for a woman to be in that space when I was coming through high school and college.
Yeah.
The jobs were tight. What I didn't realize is that, wow, there's college athletics departments that need publicists, and so that's a form of communication and journalism. So that's how I broke into this industry. But think about today as the unfortunate, and I'm a kid that used to love to run to the end of the driveway and get the day's newspaper, and I'd go to sports first, and then I'd grab Sports Illustrated out of the mailbox where my dad did and read it from the back cover to the front, because all the best columns were always in the back. Well, now these publications are thinning out because of revenue, media. The media has changed, and what has resulted for women in sports, the participants, for coverage, guess what? We do our own coverage now.
Wow, with the Longhorn Network.
We don't need, for example, the Austin American Statesman to trumpet the fact that volleyball is in the top 5 and soccer's in the top 10, and Karen Aston is, has a great recruiting class she's going to sign in November. We can pump that stuff out through social, through our own video. We have our own branded network, thanks to ESPN and their dedication to the Longhorn Network. We control our own content. So I would tell you that the pain of having to suffer through, as you just stated, the lack of inches in what used to be conventional media has been almost counterbalanced by our ability to tell our own story. And frankly, I like this era much better because we can absolutely control the story, control the content, and our student athletes are getting more than anybody ever got in probably the glory era of Texas women's athletics, which was in that, early 80s to early 90s era when, we were just getting off the dime and, crushing people and winning championships everywhere. It was really hard to reward those kids with conventional media coverage. If they were existing today, they'd be like LeBron James and rock stars with their performances.
Yeah. It's such a great perspective because it puts the power right back where it belongs.
Right, but what if you're not? What if you're not the University of Texas and have a Chris Plonsky who was able to create that deal for the Longhorn Network and all of that? Or professional sports organizations for that matter. I mean, I go back to the U.S. women's soccer team who are like incredibly successful and get 5 minutes of airplay on ESPN. And I know now we have ESPN W and all of that, but what do you do if you're not a University of Texas, a USC, where there's a Pac-12 network, or What do you? How does media come off of it?
If you think about it, the Big Ten network, the Pac-12 network, the SEC network, and now the ACC is eventually going to have a network as well. It's digital right now, but these linear networks were actually created to give coverage to all the sports, including women's sports, that were not getting coverage. I mean, I can't tell you how many doors were just closed in our face when we were really searching for a network partner, and people said, no one's going to want to watch a zillion baseball games or softball games or volleyball matches or,
it's amazing.
All the other women's basketball games or swim meet or that. Well, guess what? ESPN and Fox both competed for those opportunities. Oklahoma has a Sooner Sports network through Fox, which had been bidding on us. ESPN kind of came in and trumped their deal and took us. But I guarantee you, just in the Big 12 conference, people looked at Oklahoma and Texas as having great fortunes. And you know how successful Oklahoma's been across their women's sports and men's. But it's happening that way everywhere. Again, the digitization of content has allowed even smaller conferences that people might not even realize exist with sports, like the Horizon League, where schools in the Midwest are getting their own coverage, producing their own content for linear or mainly digital distribution. Parents don't have to miss a single event anymore. Between live streaming, you can find anything you want right now. These networks are producing almost 7,000 to 8,000 hours of content, and they include all sports across the board, not just the football, basketball, baseball, the stuff that you're seeing, that you've been seeing regularly for 40 years.
So just as we're wrapping up now, believe it or not, Chris, we're about 5 minutes away from closing. What I'm hearing from you is that even with all the kind of dire statistics, from your perspective, from the athlete's perspective, and from a career woman's perspective, things are moving in the right direction. That it's positive, right?
Yeah, they really are, and I'm a glass half full girl. I have to be in our business because if we're discouraged, the young people that we're bringing to our campuses, would be discouraged as well, along with the people that we employ to coach them. And but I think we've been at this a lot less long than the guys. I mean, there's so much history that preceded Title IX passage, and then it took Title IX probably about 8 to 10 years to really kick in, where schools were responding to it and getting after it and providing these opportunities. So if you think about the real modern era of women's sports, probably commenced truly in the early 90s, maybe the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, where, look how many of our teams won gold medals at home. And people realized these guys are legit. I mean, David Stern turned to Val Ackerman and said, we need a women's professional league after our women's, were 60-0 that year to win an Olympic medal.
Right.
And that's responsive to a guy in power that said, this is real. I believe in this. So there's lots of, responsive folks, not just the David Stern types in the world, but others who are going to carry this on. We just got to keep working at it. Frankly, the thing that I worry about the most are these, lawsuits against NCAA and all of its members to try to professionalize an aspect of sports. Because if that happens, and I don't think that would hold water long. I don't think there's a college president in America that would allow their university name to be professionalized with, 17 and 18-year-olds just playing a sport. It would truly break this model of higher education access in sport and fandom. But I do worry about it because it tends to dilute the really good things that are happening for thousands of young men and women. And I think the women, again, are at least the collegians that I see in the Group of Five and the Power Five conferences. I mean, I look at our kids every day and think, do you have any idea how great a situation you have?
Yeah,
Look at where you compete, look at how you travel, look at the exposure you get, look at the education you're receiving. I mean, it has to be the berries, and we tell them don't take it for granted, because long ago people were doing the same thing with the same passion you have with a lot less. So be sure you're grateful for what you're getting and give it your best, because these days are very numbered. And once you're done with this experience, you can't get it back.
That's it.
You
It's a
don't
great
waste
reminder.
a day. And again, I am very encouraged by, again, collegiate women's athletic success. If you watch the NCAA basketball Final Four, it was the best women's Final Four in ages. Volleyball is drawing thousands now, sellout crowds. Wherever they go. Soccer is now a mainstay, and our women's soccer and hockey teams got equal pay, not just soccer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They stood up, but hockey did too, and God bless them for doing it. And again, you've got to dare to be bold. As an administrator, I've got to dare to be bold, not be fearful of taking bullets or criticism, to fight for what we believe in. And what we believe in is opportunity for young people. And that can never be a bad fight or a bad reason.
No,
Listen, Chris, I think you are bold, and from what I've seen and what I know of you, you're a great leader, and everything that you've said today has sparked a lot of almost desire to have another 5 shows about it, because there is so much to talk about. We really, really want to thank you for taking your time to talk with us. It's been incredibly insightful.
And we're encouraged and inspired.
We are
This is
encouraged
very
and
exciting.
inspired.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we look forward to seeing you the next time we're in Austin.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to talk about the subject matter about sports and women in sport. It matters, and again, I think the support that will be engendered for all the participants will continue. It's healthy, it's good, it's American, and lots of good things on the horizon.
It's wonderful.
Thank you. Have a safe flight, and
Thank you. Y'all have a great rest of your week.
You do the same.
I got to finish my contract. Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em horns. Sorry, Eira. She's cringing right now. Hook 'em horns.
Put that hand down.
I will. Listen, I want to thank everybody who was watching. I didn't get to mention as many of you as I normally do, but I do see you, Craig Roberts, Miriam Schenken, Esther from Dallas. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed listening to Chris. I don't know.
Just
Eira,
spectacular.
She's awesome.
Spectacular.
She's really
great
awesome.
perspective.
She is. I want to thank Jarvis again, because I always sit here and watch him throw amazing stuff up on the screen from the minute we say a word.
Exactly.
So thank you, Jarvis.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
We'll be back in 2 weeks on October 31st.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, Eira might be dressing
I will consider that.
She's going to consider dressing up for Halloween. We can't come in studio and not have some kind of costume on. I mean, come on. Listen, we hope to see you on October 31st at 3 o'clock. Please like us on Facebook, The Distillery Inc. We are on iTunes. Please subscribe if you like the show. You can hear it every week. We also have a YouTube channel where we post all of these shows afterwards if you didn't get a chance. So we'll say hi to all the viewers that do pick this up afterwards.
Yep.
And have a fantastic, wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.